time, so we'll start with A, 2018-0-177 PS Properties Limited, pages 32 to 44. But we have no TV.
Does anybody know what happened to the TVs?
Never touched it. I didn't do anything here.
Just time out? No, I don't.
I don't
Want me to go get George?
I can go, Ann, if you'd like to.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
It's showing on my screen.
Yeah.
It's pointing out. Oh, maybe.
Oh,
it's-
there
we go.
There we
Hey,
go.
There we go.
you're good. You just walked
How
towards
about
the door. I think somebody must have tapped on.
Can you go get me a lottery?
We're all good.
Blame the guy from Morrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't touch the technology. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lord, no. And then you're wondering why your kids are out on the way to work.
Am I good?
I think so, we got a
Okay.
picture.
Okay.
Are you good?
Am I good? Just making sure everybody's paying attention. So the first subdivision that we have for subdivision authority today is application 2018-0-177, which is one of three applications put in by the Perlich family. This one is the Southwest 3820, west of the 4th. And this application is to take the, you notice there's a 4.87 acreage that's out there, is to reconfigure the titles. So consolidating the acreage back into the quarter and then splitting the quarter section in half with a 77.23 acre and 77.74 acre parcel. And this would just be for agricultural use, and this application does conform to the subdivision criteria and agricultural, for an agricultural parcel. And the recommendation is that this application be approved as noted in the draft resolution, and Steve will go through the comments and the resolution itself.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. This application is, like if you remember, this area was one that Perlich's had bought from Andrew Kovich's. So the yard was previously taken out there in the very southwest corner. So part of the three applications in front of you today, Perlich's are looking at doing some estate settlement and that sort of stuff amongst the family. So in this particular application, as mentioned, they're going to consolidate that yard back into the quarter section to reestablish the quarter, so it won't be a separate title. And then we subdivide the quarter section in half, creating a 77.23 and 77.74 acre in a north-south orientation. This quarter does have a pivot on it now, and it does, with the 77, the kind of equal split there as close as they can in the quarter section. There's a little bit of land area taken out on the west side because of the road, some road widening, but there'll be roughly equal portions. With the circulation on this, there is no concerns or objections received. As mentioned, with the consolidation of the yard back in, we're starting with two titles, we're not with two, there'll be no extra title here. So basically you have two agricultural titles created, the north half and the south half. So with the bylaw, the parcels meet and exceed the minimum agricultural parcel size. So with that, I have recommended approval to you. We did receive a couple more comments in since these were done before Christmas there to get them up to you for today's meeting. We did receive some comments from ACO and Fortis. They have no objections or concerns or don't need easement or anything like that. So I have recommended approval to you with the standard conditions of taxes paid and up to date, a development agreement if required, And the third, being the most important one, is the condition that the quarter be consolidated back together again, and then be surveyed out to create the two halves in the quarter there.
Any questions? Did Alberta Transportation make any comments?
They did not on this one.
Because they own the piece of property to the east there.
They commented on one of the other ones, but not on this one. But
Probably because they don't have an interest, direct interest in it.
Okay,
I'll move it. As the conditions outlined.
any further discussion? Call for the question, those in favor. Those opposed, carried. Okay, the next one is 2018-0178, 45 to 56.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this next subdivision application is the second of the ones submitted by the Furlich family, and it's for the Northwest 24821. This one is fairly straightforward. They're just looking to split this one almost in half due to the location of the yard. As you can see on the top kind of center of the quarter section, they're kind of moving around some of the buildings there, so it's not quite an even split. So there'll be a 77.59 acre parcel and a 75.44 acre parcel respectively. It does still fall within the subdivision criteria that we have for agricultural parcels. Steve will go through the resolution and any comments.
Yes, Mayor, Mr. Jarrett, so this application is located on the south side of Bound Road. To mention, it's currently all single title for the quarter section. They're looking to subdivide it in roughly 2 equal agricultural portions. As I mentioned, into the east and west half, the angle for this, instead of being parallel, it's going to be slightly 90 degrees. It's going to be slightly angled, a little bit offset. And the reason for that angled subdivision line is that so it runs through the pivot in the middle of the quarter section, because that pivot will remain on there. But it'll go through the yard at the north end there, between the house and the Quonset, without cutting through the middle of the Quonset. An original survey, when they looked at it, running the line exactly in the middle up through the pivot, through the yard to the north, cut through the middle of the Quonset. So by angling it slightly, it avoids running through the middle of a building, and also meets the bylaw for the required 20-foot setback between the property line and the building, and it'll keep the line straight all the way through the quarter section. So as I mentioned, this will be the first subdivision of the quarter section to create the 2 agricultural parcels. The existing yard will remain. The residential dwelling part will be on the west portion, and the Quonset building and a couple other farm-out buildings will be located on the east portion. This application, as mentioned, does comply with the agricultural subdivision policies. During the circulation of this one, there was no objections or concerns received. ATCO Gas did indicate that they do need an easement for a gas line. We have since heard back, since I circulated this out to you, from ATCO Pipelines, who has no requirements and no concerns with it. So with compliance with the bylaw, I have recommended approval to you. This one would be the conditions of property taxes paid and up to date, the development agreement if required, and that the ATCO Gas easement be provided.
Boris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Steve and probably the other two, it seems to me kind of odd that you want to do a full quarter section, what's been squared off and then you wanna split it and you have it with an angle, why didn't they go straight and then jog over down there at the acreages? Why not? This is odd to me. I don't think we ever had one like this before.
Hey, Mr. Chair, in the past, there's sometimes when there's been a farm in a certain location that we've jogged around the farm or the dugout. We've had a couple where the dugout was roughly in the middle and the line jogged around to one side or the other type of thing, or to include one side or the other. In this case, the reason is that the way the buildings are sitting in the yard, to avoid it cutting through one building and the other, they wanted a roughly as equal as they could between the two, the east, west, and the west half portions, and to keep the line straight, and to put it through the middle of the pivot that's on it, that's going to remain, so it cuts through the exact center of the pivot. For land titles, for the registration of the plan, you could jog around if you wanted to, but this way they only have to put 2 survey points at the north and south end and run a straight line. So it just makes an easier and straighter division and easier to register land titles than to run it straight up and then do the jog around the yard. You could do it that way. A surveyor can survey any kind of shape or angle or anything that you want. They could register a star subdivision if you approved it that way. So this was just the preference of the applicants to keep a straight line between the 2 properties and avoid the buildings in the yard.
Bob?
So are you gonna be registered both to the same owner, or are you gonna be different owners on each side?
They would be the same owner.
Same owner?
Yeah, they can sell it however they want.
Yeah, I just want,
No, it's the same owner.
yeah, same owner.
Oh, any other questions?
I'll then move that then. Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Call for the question, those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Number C, subdivision application 2018-0179, page 57 to 68.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is the 3rd application done by the Perlich family, and it is to, once again, split a unsubdivided quarter section in half, creating a title of 71.4 acres and then another title of 72.67 acres for agricultural use. This parcel, once again, does conform to the subdivision criteria for an agricultural parcel. And we would recommend approval of that. So you will go through the, if there's any comments from the circulation and the resolution.
Okay, Mr. Chair, this parcel, as described, is directly north of the one we just looked at on the north side of Brown Road. This one, they're also dividing it to a east portion and a west portion. Again, running it as close as they can through the middle of the quarter section, through the center of the irrigation pivot that's on this quarter that will also remain. This title is it'll be a little bit offset because the SMRA detail that runs along the west and north perimeter takes a little bit of acreage out of the quarter section title. As well, there's a old little yard up in the very northeast corner by the canal there that will be on the east portion there. So this application as well was circulated to City of Lethbridge, because this one is The last one was as well, but in the IDP area with the city of Lethbridge. The city had no concerns with these subdivisions as they meet the agricultural policies of the IDP and the city and the county's bylaw. This one, Alberta Transportation did comment on, and they had no comments or no concerns or objections to it because it's far enough away from their interests. On this application, I also received, since they're circulated out to you once again, the APCO pipelines comments, and they have no concerns or no requirements for easement or anything like that. None of the other utility agencies need an easement for any utilities. So with this being a split, agricultural split as well, first subdivision occurring in the quarter section, I have recommended approval to you with the conditions of property taxes paid and up to date, development agreement if needed. On the draft I sent out to you, talked there about, the third was about easements required by utility companies, but it looks like nothing will be needed in that regard. So I have recommended approval to you on it.
Any questions? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That little jog on the southwest corner, is that something with the canal also?
Yeah, the SMRD, yeah.
Okay.
So the old canal right away, like on page 64, has that become part of the title now, or is that still
It's still,
SMRD property, or?
no, it's not a SMRD property, it's probably, they stay on title as, not necessarily, like, they're not title parcels, but they're included on, they stay forever on what we call the cadastral layer. So you'll always know that there used to be a canal crossing this property, so that's why it shows up in that fashion, as like that dotted line. It's not a separate title though.
So when they put the newer canal in and they realigned that configuration, they actually gained a little piece of property from the next quarter. Is that automatically just kind of become on the very far north where the homestead is? The northeast
No.
corner?
It's actually, it's part of this
It's
quarter.
part of the canal, actually, this piece
That
up
piece
here.
there.
No,
Right below?
right there.
Yeah, that's part of this title.
That's actually part of the southwest quarter.
Oh,
Yeah.
so the other piece is not part of that,
No.
That's right.
somebody else's.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And just as a matter of interest, on some of these old cadastral ones, the irrigation districts will often have old historic stuff because they don't like to spend the money on the survey and to register land titles to get them discharged and cleaned off of there. So there are lots of them are always still on there, even though there hasn't been anything sometimes there for 20 or 30 years, the case might be, but they don't like to clean them off because it costs money, so they just often sit there. Some of the farms are doing it.
Okay. Bob?
I'll move it then.
Any further discussion? Call for the question, those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay, subdivision application 2018-0-182, Kochi, whatever that is.
ITF.
Is it an I or?
It's an I.
Okay. Pages 69 to 82.
So this application is for, to subdivide out a yard out of the northwest 11220 west of the port. And it's to subdivide out a 4.74 acre title of the yard from the unsubdivided quarter section for country residential use. This application conforms to the subdivision criteria for country residential application, but approval will need to address, as Steve notes here, the septic treatment field, which is located in the agricultural field. And Steve can go through the application and the resolution. If you want to see where that septic field goes, it's on page 79 of your agenda package. you'll note, at the top image there that, there's a little kind of bubble-ish drawing. And that's where the septic field is, outside of where they're wanting the yard, which isn't allowed. Steve, it's not allowed. You can't have a septic field going off the property. It has to be contained within the subdivided property. Steve will go
Yeah,
through
so-
that consideration.
Mr. Chair, so the applicant here is mentioned is wants to subdivide out his yard. It'll be the first subdivision out of the quarter section to create the 4.74 acre title there with the dwellings, the farm buildings, the tree shelter belts, that sort of thing. Two things that they want to exclude the dugout from the yard subdivision and keep it with the agricultural land as well. One of the things here is that I don't know if you know, anybody knows Mr. Ateo, but it's very difficult talking to him, or maybe his, I don't know if it's lack of understanding or maybe just set in his ways, but between the surveyor and myself talking to him, I think he understands, or he says he understands about the septic field and he knows he has to move it. So on that basis, I was trying to get him to adjust his application or drawing before it came to you, but he only wants to do it if you approve it, or is my understanding, after the fact. So the changes in 2013 by the province to the private sewage standards, and they put specific language in the regulation that says on-site septic system means it's on-site to the dwelling it's associated with, and it legally cannot be off-site anymore. Or years back, often, you know, subdivisions, sometimes, you know, the agricultural operator, farmers have it out in the field somewhere, and we just register an easement to protect it out there, and that thing. Province says can't do that anymore. So you either have to relocate it, put a new one in on the parcel, or we have to encompass it and include it into the yard parcel. So that's something that has to be addressed here on an approval. One of the things that this is on the east side of Highway 845, takes direct access off the highway there. So we did need confirmation from Alberta Transportation that they approved that. So the application was circulated to Alberta Transportation, and Alberta Transportation did respond before Christmas there, so it's in your package. They have no concerns, and they did grant an approval since it's the first parcel out of the quarter section on that. As well, since the circulation received comment back from APCO Pipeline, and they have no concerns and don't require anything. So looking at the application itself, there's no benches in proximity. Any feedlots up in this North Turin area, it meets or exceeds any NDS to anything in the vicinity. So as a first parcel out, I have a record approval to you. The parcel size complies, the servicing complies, all those sorts of things. So I recommend approval to you with the conditions of taxes and development agreement. And the third one, the way I word the condition on there, if you're agreeable to this, is to give Mr. Attea an option of what he wants to do. So the third condition says that the septic field line associated with the dwelling be relocated so it falls entirely within the property line of the 4.74 acre parcel being subdivided, with suitable confirmation of such right to the satisfaction of the subdivision authority prior to final endorsement. So usually we get the septic installer to file a report on that. Or the property line is to be adjusted slightly to the north to encapsulate the existing septic field encompassing approximately 0.5 acres of land as required. When we did the calculations on there, talking to the survey, that's, if you're to draw that square off and square off the parcel the way he has it, that's about the acres of land that would be required to do that. So by that way, it gives them the option either, if he wants to not put in a new septic system, he'd have to move that line to encompass that, or if it's older, he decides that he doesn't want to put it, or to relocate it, it gives him that option, kind of a thing. So
Mr. Chair. Wouldn't it be easier if this person would make up his mind before you go and do all the work? And can't you say, well, you gotta make up your mind first before we do anything? Doesn't it work that way?
Unfortunately, you can apply for it as you want, and council then has to decide their deciding authority as the subdivision authority on whether they have to change it. So he's most people would decide one way or another, I would say, but it sounds like Mr. Atea is maybe a little, he doesn't want to commit. So you have to force his hand, I guess, in this situation.
So if he chooses the option to move it, how do you know or confirm that he did it actually?
We can get the installer to submit a report to us.
Yeah, in cases where, we've done that a couple other times over the years, and what I do is ask for he has to have somebody certified with the province to do the installation, and then they file a report and a diagram, and I get the surveyor who's doing the final survey here for him to capture it, so that we know that it's fully within the property, and it has to meet a minimum 5 feet to the property line also has to be set within, so it meets the setbacks, whatever. So we ensure that that's done between the septic installer and the surveyor, that's captured.
Sorry.
Just in addition to that, they would have to get a permit for the septic installation through Department of Enterprises, so that would be another method for me to confirm that it was installed properly.
Bob, and
That was what I was gonna ask you.
Okay. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if it's approved and they don't move it, then what?
They would have to they would have to change the survey to include the septic in the survey.
Like this has to be done within a 2-year period, or?
1 year.
1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you. You know, the thing is, I know what you're dealing with, and anyways, but the other one is, we could say as a council today, we can't approve this one till you come with a firm place where you want your septic or how you want to outline your subdivision.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of wishy-washy and,
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you could. I mean, there's basically only 2 options, and that's why I included in the condition is either you relocate it within the parcel that you, wherever, or we put the line on the other side there to capture it, and then that becomes part of your parcel. I mean, that's the only 2 things we can really do, so. I don't know if it was a case that he didn't want to pay the surveyor to go back out to move the line and on the drawing, because the surveyor would charge him field time to go out and do that and that sort of a thing. But I said, he's a difficult individual to talk to on the phone. I'm not sure if it's a lack of understanding or the English thing or what it is, and he's older. I know the surveyor talked to him more times too, but so I say, I'm not sure if it's just a difficulty in communication or lack of understanding or what, but these are really the only 2 options we could do is either put it in, or if you don't want a new septic, then we move the line on the other side, so it's either one or the other. So I figured this way, because of the gap over Christmas, with the time frame and your meeting being pushed back here, we could keep still moving along here, whatever, he's just gotta do one or the other.
And just because approval of the subdivision they would have to do this prior to it being endorsed. So they don't get anything until they've completed that condition.
And we don't sign off on it until he approves one or the other.
In the long run, it would be way cheaper to get the surveyor back out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes, it would. And I think that's what he wants, and I think that's what he wants to do. But I think so.
Any other questions? So what do you guys want to do? Do you want to, we can bring back a firm commitment, or do you want to set up the options? Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if we put these conditions on it, we can approve it as such. Today, he can go anywhere until he makes up his mind exactly what he's gonna be doing that, then that's what his motion is on anyways. So, thank you.
Are you making that motion?
I'm making it.
Anything else? Okay, I'll call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carries. Subdivision application 2018-0-183 Vandenberg Cattle Company, and that page is 83 and 96.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the last subdivision for today. This application is excuse me for a second here. This application is to refigure 2 titles by subdividing 78.8 acres from an agricultural parcel comprised of 224 acres and consolidating it to the west adjacent 78.23 acre titles, thereby creating the western parcel would be 157 acres in size, and the other title would be 145.9 acres in size. So these are the 2 parcels in question here, and what they want to do is they want to pretty much put back the quarter section line to where it was originally, down the middle, where that 25 is, and so that there's a pivot on one side and a pivot on the other side, essentially. So with that, we would recommend approval on this as it is a reconfiguration of titles and it meets the subdivision criteria for an agricultural parcel. Steve will go through the any comments that came in and also the resolution.
And Mr. Chair, so this application is to largely reestablish the quarter section from the northwest of 2510-22 west of 4th, and put it back together. About 14 years ago, Mr. Vandenberg had purchased and subdivided the east half that he was utilizing at that time. And with that application, he was forced to consolidate to his northeast of 2510, kind of west of the 4th there, because that parcel as a standalone didn't have any access to it. There was no road touching, as you can see there, so it was isolated. So because he had the adjacent quarter section to the east, he consolidated that time, and council the day approved that with the consolidation, and he was farming all that. So subsequently here, 15 years later, the landowner for the northwest there, 2510-22, wants to purchase it. So he's going to consolidate it back into his quarter section. As you can see there's a pivot on there. They've been operating a pivot together on there and farming it together. So this will reestablish the quarter section, and that landowner for the northwest quarter will operate that pivot system and utilize it all as one quarter section for his operations. So he has more of a land base there. So this will be a subdivision and consolidation. No standalone title will be created. So Mr. Vandenberg's will go back his title to what's the remaining of the northeast quarter for 25. And then we have the other title here for the quarter section being established for the northwest, 2510-22 west of the 4th. So with the consolidation, Mr. Vandenberg takes access from the east, indirectly off Highway 25. With the consolidation to the northwest, that quarter section has access to the west county road allowance. So with that, as part of the circulation, where transportation was referred to, they did comment on the subdivision. They have no objections or concerns to it. They view it as a reestablishment of an agricultural parcel, and it meets their criteria with the existing access which can remain. So they've granted approval of that. Likewise, during the circulation here, there was no objections or concerns received. To this date, none of the utility companies indicated that they need an easement for any utility lines. So with the consolidation, we'll have a 157.11 acre agricultural title and then a 145.95 acre title, which meets and exceeds your minimum agricultural parcel sizes. It's pretty much reestablishing that core section division line between the northwest and the northeast. So that complies with the bylaw. So as Hillary mentioned, I did recommend approval to you. And be on the conditions of taxes paid and up to date, a development agreement if required. And the most important one would be the third condition, that the titles and portions of land to be subdivided and consolidated are done by a plan prepared by an Alberta land surveyor in a manner such that the titles cannot be re-subdivided. So putting the northeast and northwest back to their separate titles respectively. So it would be on the basis of those conditions.
Just a curiosity question. How can you subdivide when you already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? There's about 8 subdivisions out already.
Part of that is from the hamlet, these ones down here, is that what you're speaking
Yeah.
to? Yeah, so a large portion of those are contained within the hamlet. Only 2 that are within, that are separate out of the hamlet is this acreage here and then this acreage here. So there's currently 3 titles.
And Mr. Chair, back in 2005, when this 80 acres was added to his, that was unrelated to the northeast, and the subdivisions in the hamlet parcels really out of there. It was consolidated over to the northeast quarter section. It could have been a standalone title at that time, because at that time we also allowed the 80 acre parcels, the cores, to be split in half. But just because he didn't have access, it was consolidated over to that quarter so that it wouldn't be a cut-off parcel. So it was added to that, irrespective of the hamlet and those other parcels along Highway 25. So now this application, they're putting it back, so.
Ross?
On the, can you move that a little bit back that way? Yeah. There is also, on the north side of Northwest 25, there's also a roadway right there between Julius Urban and that one, right there, yeah. Because that was made for Tony Heights to be able to get to his quarter from his.
Okay.
But maybe that's just an understanding that they have amongst each other, but.
Yeah,
I would think
it's
so.
a private easement agreement between the two of them.
Okay.
So I still don't understand how you can subdivide. It's already got subdivisions out.
Because we're not subdividing the northeast 25 from what it originally was further, taking another standalone parcel out. The piece we're taking off here, which was added to that title, is irrespective of what's happened in the northeast of 25. That wasn't added on, like, sometimes they say, we're taking a parcel out, so you have to consolidate this in order to get your 1-for-1, so you have to start with 2 titles and up with 2 titles. That wasn't the basis of why the east half of the northwest quarter was tied to that. The only reason it was tied was for access reasons. When they subdivided the northwest of 25 into the 280s, it could have been a standalone title, and it didn't need to be tied to the northeast of 25. The only reason it was to provide him access so he'd be touching the road. At that time, in that 2000 subdivision file, they also looked similar to Mr. Hines there about doing an easement along the bottom. But for whatever reason, Mr. Banner said, well, I don't need the easement across your land because I'm purchasing, I'll just tie it to mine. So that'll give me access.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we not say that the other part there, that the other subdivisions that are all there, they've been there since the beginning of time, just about probably. So wouldn't that just be grandfathered in the way they are situated there?
Oh yeah, so 2 things. The hamlet parcels don't count because that's part of the definition of part of the public use because it's part of the hamlet.
Just the 2 acreages.
So, yeah, so for now, for instance, if after this, let's say if Mr. Vandenberg was to come and want another separate yard parcel out of the northeast 2522, he couldn't do that because of the other, as Reeve Hickey said, it would be considered subdivided, he won't be able to take a standalone parcel out. Like I said, this piece, we're taking the 80 acres that's tied to that. It wasn't because of anything that happened in the northeast, it was because of the subdivision that happened in the northwest, and they just tied it over on their own. They weren't required to as part of the subdivision approval, they were allowed an easement, but they just did it on their own out of convenience, basically, because they decided not to register an easement.
So who owns the balance then of the northwest 25 sign? Is that different people?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And Vandenberg owns the, I'll call it the east half of the
Yes.
border.
He owns this, so this landowner wants to have control and ownership of the entire pivot. So it's back to a quarter section.
I guess he's farming it right now, but
That's Van Bruno.
Socials.
That's very yours?
Yeah.
yes, you are correct, that is, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
if I may.
yeah.
So I guess with regards to the other 2 parcels out, with moving the quarter section line, with moving this line back to the proper quarter area, we're not creating any new parcels for Mr. Vandenberg. We're just retaining back to the quarter section. He's not getting any new parcels out of it.
No, he's just getting a smaller parcel.
He's getting a 145.9 acre parcel.
But it's legally, it's the quarter section, but from the original.
Yeah, basically that line is being moved over. Here again, we start with 2 and end up with 2, there won't be a standalone type. One's getting bigger, one's getting smaller.
Hey, any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move the recommendation for approval.
Any further discussion? Call the question, those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's move on to L, invitations. And the first one is page 182 to 185, that's Fifth Street Chamber of Commerce. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the recommendation that Reeve Hickey, Councilors Zinstra and Vanderbeek be authorized to attend the Fitchview District Chamber of Commerce AGM.
Sorry. Morris?
Yeah, thank you. You can take my name off, I just go on my own. Like if somebody, other councilor, if you feel another councilor should go, but I'm not going with the county. I'm gonna be there on my own and
I'd ask the obvious question. You went out. I was just wondering which half was going and which half wasn't, but anyway. Any further discussion?
well, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
I will be there, and if I can find anything possible to say a couple of nice things to have with the county, I sure will, but I'm still gonna be there on my own. I'm not gonna be down there on the county's behalf, but I will be there. Thank you. I can even mention your name if you're not gonna be there.
yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
You'd rather you not be there than if it says something about you.
Any further discussion? Call the question.
Just for clarification, I think it's actually Reeve Hickey, Councillor Vanderveen, both, and I'm not sure if that was the way the resolution was read or not. But I didn't hear that, but.
He just said the recommendation.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Are you gonna go, Klaus? Yeah.
Lauren, are you wanting to go? I
Yeah.
thought I need to know today.
I have to let you know in a minute.
Okay. Tickets are supposed to be by the door for you? Yes. You have to pay for them.
Okay, pages 186 to 190, Alberta Health Services, Community Conversation, February the 5th, Library meeting grant.
Just for further, to speak about this, the discussion that we had putting somebody on the Alberta Health Service, this is a community check-in to see how they're doing. So I'm going to attend certainly, but it's a good opportunity to ask them questions about our concerns about the ambulance service as well too, if anybody's interested in attending.
We gonna make a motion? Dory?
I move the recommendations, Chairman.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. You can let Lorraine know if you're gonna go. And the last one is Chinese New Year.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. The Reeve, Deputy Reeve, myself, and the Economic Development Officer have been invited to attend the Chinese New Year celebration in Calgary at Heritage Park on the 31st of January.
Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the recommendation.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Did I miss anything? Got everything done?
We're good.
Oh, do you need a closed session? No. Okay. No council reports. Needed a motion to adjourn.
Move so.
I think there was somebody else.